Hello, and I am back after having some well-earned time off. I've been on holiday, as you can tell from my tan. Uh, I am back, and I'm back with another Adeptus Custodes Tactics video. Still taking a bit of time off away from the podcast, letting those guys do their thing, and I'm going to continue to do my thing. As you can see, I'm not in my usual space right now. It's because I'm actually on another holiday, but I'm recording. Nonetheless, I'm actually seeing some of the Black Crow guys tonight from down in the south side of the country, down Dorset way. But anyway, enough of what I'm doing and what I'm up to. Let's get into what we're here for today. And today is for an Adeptus Custodes Tactics video. And before we get into any of that, there are some certain things I would love you to do. If you like the content and you like what you're seeing, if you could please do me some magic favor and hit those magical YouTube buttons. That's a like, that is a subscribe, and that is the bell notification. Hitting all of those things massively helps us grow, as we've recently hit the 1,000 sub mark, which is amazing. We could only do that from all of your continual support. If you want to continue to support us, there are two magical sponsors that sponsor us, and giving them the support would be amazing, because that then helps us. Just saying. So our first sponsor we have tonight, we're going to be talking about Glasshammer Gaming. Glasshammer Gaming, if you want your miniatures cheaper, well, glasshammergaming.com can do it cheaper for you. But if you want it even cheaper, you put in Black Crow into your coupon code and you get an additional 5% off. They already offer up to 15 to 20%. This just gives you an extra 20 to 25%. Pretty tasty, especially when the cost of everything has gone up, and this is bringing the cost of everything down. Our other sponsor, which is what you'll be seeing on all of our battle reports, is the fantastic terrain from Terrain Forge. They make bespoke terrain just for you, me, and anybody who wants it. And they recently completed a big order of supplying the, I think it's the Welsh team, all of their WTC terrain, which is pretty cool. But if you put in BCG in their coupon code, you get another 5% off. So here we are, just offering 5% off everywhere. Anyway, enough of this. Let's get into it. This week's episode is about list building. Now, I asked the Discord what did they want from this week's episode, and they were all pretty resounding, and they'd like to know kind of like our process for some list building. So I was like, cool, makes sense. So let's get into it. So list building comes down to some pretty key points, and these points is what I consider every time I make a list. So one of the first points I think about is, what is the meta? Is it Dark Angels, Blood Angels, Necron Sisters? That's kind of the current flavor. I kind of think, well, what can I do to combat that? And that can be challenging sometimes, because Custodes, we don't have a huge amount of tech, but what we do have is resilience. So I need to you sit there and think, well, what is it that Dark Angels or Blood Angels and Necrons and Sisters, what are they putting out? What is the type of damage they put out? Is it firepower? Is it melee threat? And then you got to think, well, how can I mitigate that? How can I work around that? So when you go into that matchup, you can make it as good a matchup for yourself as possible. So, if you've watched recently, we've been doing a lot of Dark Angels Tactica, and those videos have been doing really well. And they're really great in the meta right now. Our Black Crow player, Toby, has been doing really well, won a couple RTTs with them. And, they've been performing really strong. And one of the things that I spoke to him about was like, Toby, what would be a problem for you? I said, how is this combo? And previously in my other episodes, I talked about the Valerian combo. Valerian and Wardens, that -1 AP, the -1 to wound if you're above their toughness. And one thing to consider with a lot of these combat armies is there's a lot of AP too. All of a sudden, saving from 4-ups to 3-ups is quite big. And that Warden brick, or whatever brick you decide to put Valerian in, all of a sudden becomes quite tough, quite durable. Saving on 3-ups, much better than saving on 4-ups. So that's just a little bit of tech that we can use into certain units that Dark Angels and Blood Angels might put out. For example, Blood Angels are very good with that kind of loads of chainsword attacks, and they get them up to like AP2, and there's just loads of them. Bringing them back down to AP1, you having your free up armor save, then having a 4+ feel no pain because you will pop it at that point. That's really strong, and that will keep you in that match a lot longer, and you probably win that fight because actually the damage you put out per man is far greater. The next question I kind of asked myself, well, what models do I have available? We can't expect every custodian player out there to have Forge World units and have all of the units that that are available to Adeptus Custodes right now. So you have got to play with what you've got. A lot of people, obviously, when there was a Virtus Praetor meta back in 9th, had a lot of Virtus Praetors. Unfortunately, they're currently still not where they need to be. But not saying that that's not going to happen. We're currently in a meta where, with Custodes, where having lots of infantry really does work. But as you're going to see from the list I'm going to debut later in the show, I still think tanks are a really important part of what Custodes put out. Thinking about the models you have, you need to think, well, what does each unit do? What is it there to achieve? And how are you going to achieve it? So, for example, you might have a unit of guard. Is that unit of guard going to be there to sit on your home objective, or are you going to use those guard to push out onto wider flanks? If doing that, you need to think when your opponent is deploying, how my units are going to stack up against what's being deployed in front of me. So it's really important as a Adeptus Custodes player to try and manage your resources, because we lose our resources, we feel every loss, and it's really important to know how we're going to mitigate the damage. I would pretty much say every time in your deployment, it's good to try and stack multiple units going towards the same objective, because then you can push on to objective, that unit behind can hold, and then the other unit can push the line forward. And what that looks like is basically Unit A moves on to objective. Unit B moves on to the objective behind. Unit A then moves forward. Okay? You also want to try and be hugging that terrain. The firepower out there is so strong that Adeptus Custodes, like just weight of fire, will just kill us. And we can't bank on our 4-ups to save us all the time. The next point I always consider, is it casual or is it competitive? I don't want to be rocking up to playing my friends and they're saying, I just want a casual game, and then bring in the absolute death bomb filth. It's just not fair. It's not fun. So that's really important. But if it's competitive, that's when you want to start looking at the 2 above points really in depth and thinking, what can I do? What can I do in the current meta? Where am I sat? What does that matchup look for me? And then you also want to consider your own player ability. What am I capable of? As long as you know your rules and the core rules, you're probably going to do quite well. But having some wider knowledge about other factions is always going to be useful. And the only way you're going to get that is by playing more games. More games of Warhammer equals a better player, equals more fun. The other thing I kind of look at when I'm playing, especially when I'm building these lists, is how does my list play the mission? And typically when I build a list, as you're going to see, I like to have some speed. I like to have some throwaway units. I like to have a utility unit. And what those units basically do is they're there to go score me points. And points win prizes. They're there to play me in missions. So in round 1, if I draw something like containment, and I very thoughtfully put 2 prosecutors on either flank, they can literally move up, get me containment, and there you go, score me 6 points. Do I mind if I lose a 40-point unit? Not overly, but then also my opponent's probably not going to be wasting their resources on that. They may well do to try and force me to then score points with my custodian. That may be the case that actually you might be in a situation where you just don't need to use those prosecutors to score the containment. It all depends on the deployment and the type of game you're going into. But I'm just kind of giving you an idea of what I might use to play the mission. I like the Caladius Assassin. Some people don't. I do. That utility to bring it up and down every turn, really useful. How long we're going to be able to use these assassins in what way? I don't know. We do know that there's obviously the Imperial Agents book coming out very soon. I will be picking that up, and I will be looking at how those combos will reflect with the Adeptus Custodes units. I think there's definitely going to be some interesting play there. I'm probably definitely going to be investing in something in additional to bring to my Custodes, just because I think it looks cool, it's narrative, and I like the sound of that. Whether or not it's competitive remains to be seen, but we'll see that as we get closer to it. The big one, if you were a tournament player playing competitive, this is absolutely massive. Have you read the mission pack of an event? Have you looked at the deployment maps? That is very important, because if you're going into a really heavy, dense board, you might not want massive, bulky units like our dreadnoughts, like our tanks. So that's where you might consider more of an infantry-based army. However, if you see it and it's quite vast and you're going to be hiding key units, or you're going to be putting stuff up into reserve, tanks might be the way forward, because our firepower on our tanks is very reliable. Very strong, very reliable, and can do an obscene amount of damage if it pops off, especially in some of our key shield hosts. It's not shield, battle detachments like shield host and talons. And also with the list, what are you trying to achieve? Do you want a fast, hard hitting list? Do you want a list that's just going to push, fret, and try and hold out? Do you want a more reserved list that sits back and kind of lets the opponent come to yourself? And that's really important thing to consider in your list. Like, what do you want? Do you want to go full send on Blade Champions and Warden blobs or Custodian Guard blobs? Or do you want to go for the more cautious approach of having Custodian Guard holding a line? Do you want to use Venatari, which are extremely popular in the Custodian meta right now, to free rapid ingress, just to have blobs of them everywhere and doing that maximum amount of damage? That's all really much up to you. My next point, and we're going to kind of look at some of the example lists that I've kind of come up with, is this is my current shield host list. Now, you're probably looking at it thinking, oh, okay, well, what's this about? I'm going to talk you all through it. So, I take Valerian. Valerian I really like. Before I was really unsure, but that -1 AP in damage, that -1 AP in combat, I found in the current meta to be extremely valuable. He's been an MVP. He also puts out an insane amount of damage himself. And if you watch my previous videos, I talk about the characters and what tier they are and what their damage output is. But he can flip a die once per game, which could be quite clutch on a save. He's got Feel No Pain himself. He also has an awful lot of attacks. He has a Strength 8 spear. He's got an AP 3 spear. Him on his own can do an awful lot of damage in a unit, and then you couple that with a blob unit like the Custodian Wardens, which is what he's going to be going into. That Warden brick becomes really, really tough to remove, especially if I put it into the right unit. I don't want them getting shot off the board. So they need to be hidden. They need to be biding their time. I then have a Blade Champion, which I put into a Custodian Guard squad. I like that because Custodian Guard typically are more reliable at killing things with their reroll to wound. They've got that double shoot. And the Blade Champion is basically a teleportation device. You put the Blade Champion in there, you're using him for his move, advance, and charge. Getting him in there, getting them onto a point, which is an objective, getting them into the fray is really important. But you don't want to throw them away too early, because ultimately they're a strong unit and they're quite the counter normally onto that unit is quite hard, because your opponent will be, ooh, that hurt. Here you go. I've got to get rid of that. I then take another Custodian Guard unit, and they are a unit to kind of reinforce a flank, hold a home, and they're a battle line unit, right? So, and that's really important to use. And they just give you so much versatility having that additional unit. Moving on to those wide objectives is really useful. And this list does come with surprisingly a large amount of units. I've then got a blob of 3 Alaris. Now, I was really in two minds about whether I take the Alaris or I drop them and take another brick of Venatari Custodians. But what I like about the Alaris, and the reason I keep the Alaris, is you can drop them down somewhere, you can pick them back up, and then you can drop them somewhere else. I like that. That's a pretty good feel. So actually, they're probably the unit that I rapid ingress for 1 CP and then rapid ingress my Venatari Custodians. Because actually, Alaris Custodians are extremely tough. Extremely tough. Toughness 7, 4 wounds. They pop out quite a lot of shooting damage. They can actually do quite a lot of damage, and I found 3 is a really good break point. My friend Aaron Wilson, who is the current #1 Custodian player in the UK, unfortunately, I wasn't able to catch him up this year. He swears by them. He thinks 3 is enough to kill small vehicles, get into combat. They'll do enough damage. And you know what? I agree. A unit of 3 large custodians, very tough. And I think actually they have a utility in just about every list you play. I've already talked about the Wardens being with Valerian, and a lot of people run like the triple Warden brick. And yes, I think the triple Warden brick is good. Do I take it currently? No, because I'm kind of going a different way with the list, as you can see from this list. But in some of my lists, absolutely, I'd run a triple Warden brick just to be really difficult to shift, really annoying to kill. I even put in axes because I like that damage free. At times, that can really pop off. So yes, that has a play. And absolutely, if you have 3 units of Wardens with 3 Blade Champions or a Valerian, you should be running it. I then use 2 Calades Grav tanks with blaze cannons. Those tanks are excellent. You need 2. 1's not enough. 2's the magic number. 3's too much, in my opinion. 215 points. I don't think Custodians are cheap enough to say, yes, let's go 3. They're there on your backline. They're very big, so they're great at screening the backline, which is something that I considered because of these deep strike threat. Don't get me wrong, if someone's got a 3-inch deep strike, not much you can do about it. Just try and keep them off your objectives. Put it into a way that they physically can't get into your objectives. But the bases of those are massive. Now, bear in mind, with pivot, every time you pivot and turn, you're going to lose 2 inches. So that is something to consider. They're a little bit slower, less maneuverable than they were before, but that doesn't really affect the fact that they're still amazing at shooting things. It also keeps your opponent honest. They're not going to want to bring their valuable heavy assets out when you've got a custodian, like a Calades Grav tank. Not unless they really have to. And if they do bring it out, they've probably got to target the Calades Grav tank, because if they don't, the Calades Grav tank will probably kill it. So it's a tough one, especially for Marine players. Marine players hate Calades Grav tanks because they're just really efficient at killing them. Here's what it is. We've got to have something, folks. Next is my 2 units of 4 prosecutors. Like I kind of alluded to earlier, they are there to score me points. They're OC2, which is great. That means that those 4 prosecutors are 8 OC on an objective. That's pretty good, especially with people using sort of faster units to get on, which may only be like 5 OC. You just move them on. Hey, that's my objective. My cheap throwaway chaff unit that I use to score me points. And I do try and protect them. I don't just kind of let them die willy-nilly. I do actually like to use them to play the objective. Because like I said in my list building tips, what does my list want to do? Well, my list wants them to play the objectives for me. So most players tend to try and target and kill them because they're quite easy to kill. However, they're also frustrating because you can't just put 5 bolters into them because you probably won't kill them. And that's something that players have to think about when they're going into you. So they're quite resilient in some ways. Yes, they're only toughness 3 girls, but they do have a 3-up save. And in cover and in go to ground, you can mitigate and make them frustrating to shift. Don't get me wrong, if someone shoots you with a bunch of plasma and melter, they're just flat dead. But you're okay with the plasma and melter going into that unit if they're not targeting your custodians. My next 2 units, as you can see, I've got 2 units of Venatari Custodians. They are units of 3. They've got 2 lances and 1 kinetic destroyer and a Tarsus buckler. And the reason I run them like that is because the guy with 4 wounds is there to die. You take damage back, he stacks that free damage, so it makes sense, because obviously you need 2 lots of free damage to kill one of him, whereas with the Guy of the Lance, you just need 1 lot of free damage. So that's why he's there. I use them to be annoying, help in other combat situations where I may need a little bit of backup. They're extremely good when I need to just be getting around the boards, capturing late of game objectives, killing things, small units, stuff like that. They're extremely good. They struggle into the chunkier units because you just don't quite have the damage output in that build, but they do enough for what I need them to do, because I've got all this other stuff that quite reliably will kill things. I've then got 2 assassins, the double assassins. And I'd probably say, Aaron, why are you not taking Draxus? And don't get me wrong, I love Draxus. But in this list, like I said, folks, it's all about what I'm trying to do. And this is Custodes Assassin and the Eversaw. The Custodes Assassin can up and down every turn. At the end of your opponent's turn, you pick it up, you put it down. Very, very useful for scoring points. The Eversaw Assassin is a missile. He moves 9 inches. He is rapid. He can move, advance, and charge. He will bully and will kill quite a few units. He is very annoying, and he has the grenades keyword. Very important. So he's very, very useful for lots of different reasons, and I just like the utility of both those assassins. Yes, it's 175 points, but it's 170 points that could score me 20 points on their own, and that's important. They've got their lone op, which means they're not getting targeted, so you can be a little bit more playful with them, and I really rate them in any list, and I put them in pretty much every list I build. My next one is a Talons of the Emperor list, and I'm probably not the best person with Talons of the Emperor, but I know Custodians very well, and I know how this list what this list could look like, and I actually made something that I think I'd play on a table, and Talons of the Emperor only works if you've got sisters. So how can I include sisters? So I went for a Blade Champion with that Radiant Mantle, and that Radiant Mantle is that -1 to hit in that 12-inch bubble. That's really good, really strong, and I thought I'd take that on the Blade Champion because he's probably the unit that's going to need it. Again, I've taken Valerian because I love Valerian in this meta, and I'm actually putting him in with a unit of 5 Wardens to be really strong. I've then got the Knight Centurion. You're probably thinking, why have I taken it over a Leia who has fights first? Look, sisters aren't difficult to kill if they're shot. So actually, what you need is to get them there. The Knight Centurion gives that unit +2 to move, +2 to their advance, and +2 to their charge. Now, that's really strong. Essentially, what you're doing is you're moving your Rhino up, which these sisters will be in. With the Knight Centurion, you're then getting them into position, then you get them out, and then you go 6, but it'll actually be 8. So you move your sisters 8 inches because of that +2, and then you charge them 2d6 +2. That's basically always giving you a 4-inch advance, which is very strong. Big threat range. I remember in previous videos talk about threat range, and I've talked about how important it is to understand threat range. And basically, that one unit has a 22-inch threat range, and you put them with the Vigilators, her with the Vigilators. A unit of 10 Vigilators coming out of that Rhino, going swinging those great swords, and they can actually put out quite a large amount of damage. I then got 2 Custodian Guard units, one to go with the Blade Champion, and the other one that, again, like I've spoken previously, as like a utility and going around doing things. I then got 2 Cladius Grav Tanks with the Blaze Cannons because they are really useful. Does this list have a variant where it is all troops? Absolutely. I could go all Venatari. I could go for another unit of Venatari. I could then put in another unit of Wardens. That definitely has some play. But I like the Cladius Grav Tanks at the minute, and I think if you had them, you probably like the feel of them too. If you don't have them, then have a look at the other variant I talk about of going more troop heavy. Or, there's lots of other ways. These are just example lists, right, that I would build the models I have. If I had Canis Rex, maybe this would look different. If I had other units, maybe this would look different. I have pretty much the whole Custodian range, bar a few units. And this is kind of where I'm feeling comfortable with at the minute. The Venatari, I've done them with spears this time. not removing the Tarsus buckler. There's a reason that is because I want them what I want them to do. I've got Witch Seekers, I've got Vigilators, I've got Wardens, I've got Custodian Guard, I've got a lot of stuff that can sit on points. But those 2 units I actually want to go off and kill stuff. Because I feel like this list, when you take your sisters, you're losing the ability to go out and just flat kill. So, although it may not look like that because I have surprisingly a large amount of units. But yeah, that's what I want to use for. I've then gone for 2 units of 4 Witch Seekers. And the reason I've gone for the Witch Seekers is because I want that scout ability, basically. I want to scout them onto points if they need to. I like the Flamers. I also had the points over the Prosecutors. So that's why I went for the Witch Seekers pretty much. And I like that feel. This list, if I was playing Talons, this is the sort of list I'd go for. I like it. And I would love to know what you guys think about them both. If in the comments you've got, you can then post what you think. Tell me what you like about it, what you'd like to see in further episodes. I'd really appreciate it. We're pretty much at the end of it now. Any questions, please ask. And going forward, I'm going to continue to use the Custodian Discord that we've set up, which has got some of the best players in the country currently residing in there, which you can all join. It's just going to be in the description below. Just come and join us. Come and ask me some questions, and you never know, I might make it one of the topics for for a future episode. And then you get to hear me discuss and work out and talk about exactly the thing that you're wondering and you're thinking. And I use that Custodian Discord just to kind of help with me brainwave ideas and feel like this is what I'm using, this is what I'm going for. And just give you some idea, like I went on an all-troop heavy list, and I took that to Glasshammer because the Glasshammer terrain was really dense. I was the only Custodian that went positive. I had a 3-2 record. Could have quite easily been a 4-1, but I went 3-2. Only Custodian player there that went positive. And that's because I'd really thought about the terrain and how my list would work with terrain. And if you all start to do that, I guarantee you'll all be getting the results that you want. I've been Aaron. I want to just say a massive thank you for everybody for watching my content. If you like what you see, please like, sub, and subscribe. Join us on Discord, and I'll see you next week for the next episode. Bye.